Hello and welcome back to the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, Ian Rivers, my co-host. Ian, always a great week to be a Beaver, but this week there's just not quite as much momentum with the Bemidji State athletic program after this weekend. It wasn't bad. Let me preface it with that. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. You know what I mean? It's frustrating because there was some good mixed in with some bad, mixed in with some I don't know. The vibes are just off. They're not bad. They're not good. They're just off this week. I don't know. Just on a big picture level, how you feeling, Ian?
Not very good. I mean, if you're going to put it bluntly, it was a pretty bad weekend. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of W's to go around, and that unfortunately means that it's a bad weekend. Like, yeah, it stinks. It could be worse. Absolutely, yes, it could be worse, but that's why we didn't say it's terrible. We just said it's bad. It didn't go our way this weekend, unfortunately. Maybe we turn that around and we get some better results this next weekend. But this weekend, unfortunately, was not one that we're going to be trying to remember for a long time, at least.
The word frustrating is probably going to end up in the podcast title at some point.
Yeah.
It's going to, I don't know how specifically we're going to use it. We have the banner on our YouTube stream, which you can go watch on YouTube if you want. A frustrating weekend for Beaver sports. And I think that's probably the best way to do that. Men's hockey was frustrating. Women's hockey and volleyball didn't get the stats they wanted. Women's soccer was frustrating. Football, this one's tough, Ian. This was a tough loss on the road. Only by 3 points. You lose 31-28 down to Winona. We knew it was going to be tough. Like, we thought this was a game Bemidji State could win, but we also knew that it's never easy to go down to Winona and play. It's never easy to go on the road in this conference and play anybody. And they end up coming away with the loss. I wasn't able to catch much of the game because I was calling a football game on Saturday for high school. But Ian, what did you make of this game?
I missed a decent amount of the first half myself, running some errands before the game started, unfortunately. It took me, I think, 4 hours to pick up all the leaves in the yard, and I wasn't quite expecting it to take that long. So that's kind of where that came from. But, the second I turned it on, it became apparent what was going to go wrong for the Beavers in this game, and it was special teams 1 of 1. That is the major thing. I think Alex Faber put a tweet out there that said the Beavers outgained them, I think, through the air, on the ground, and played better scoring defense or something.
If you want to look at it, I'll give you the quick stats and then I'll get to your point. Bemidji State total yards had 397 to 273, pass yards 231 to 150, rush yards 166 to 123, penalties the same number of penalties. BSU had about 8 more penalty yards, 21 first downs, 14 first downs for Winona State. On third down, Bemidji State was 7 of 16. Winona State was 8 of 16. And Bemidji State did own time of possession 31-17 compared to 21-43. Continue.
Yeah, it didn't go your way in the special teams department. And I've been a fan of teams before. I think the famous one, or infamous, if you want to call it that, is the 2010 Chargers that had a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense and missed the playoffs. Well, that's because you missed tons of kicks and have tons of blunders, and that was in a vacuum what happened in this game. From the second I turned it on, I'm thinking, all right, BSU's in a good position here. They're up 7, I believe, before the half. It was 14-7, I believe. They're getting the ball back. The defense just forced Winona to punt. They're getting the ball back at around midfield. They have a chance to go down and score with like 1 minute and 45 seconds left. And they immediately go 3 and out, and then the punt is not very good, and it's returned a long, long ways, and Winona ends up setting up in good field position, getting a touchdown, and so that's a potential 14-point swing. But if you don't allow that massive punt return, then they don't have I can't remember how long that drive was, but right before the half, I believe it only took them 31 yards. They got it all the way basically down towards field goal range, and then again in the second half, it opens up with a 64-yard punt return touchdown. So that's 2 punts in a row, I believe, from BSU. That the punt coverage was just horrible. And I could be wrong, but I believe there's some missed kicks in here as well for BSU. Let's see. BSU field goals. Mantelli made 4 of 4 PATs. And he had 1 field goal blocked. That is right. Yes. So it just the special teams was 100% what loses you this. What was it? A 3-point game at the end? Yeah.
Right.
31 to 28. When you make that many special teams blunders, it's going to come back and bite you, because if you don't make those, you win the game 31 to 21 or whatever it ends up being. It's frustrating, but we talked about it pre-show. This was about as even as you could get of a game. I mean, 7-7. This is the box score for the scores of this game. 7-7 in the first quarter, 7-7 in the second quarter, 7-7 in the third quarter. And unfortunately for BSU, it was 7-10 in the fourth quarter. So they just couldn't finish there at the end, unfortunately. They did end up kind of tagging on a 13-second left touchdown from Sam McGath to make it look a little bit better, too, because it was in the second half not very pretty. But unfortunately for the Beavers, this is now their 3rd loss of the season, which is, I believe, tied for the most if you include the playoff losses since we've started covering the team. And it's been a while since we've had a season this down, at least in the regular season. I have to imagine, unfortunately, this kind of slams the door shut on any playoff hopes. You never know what could happen if you go out and look really, really good in these next 3 games. They are against good opponents, 2 of which are at home. You never
those
know.
2 home games of which are teams that are going to be in that playoff consideration.
Yeah, so you never know, and they're not going to stop playing hard. And so we'll keep kind of seeing where BSU maybe lines up in any rankings. But at 5-3, you have to just take it one step at a time now, and hope that you can get a win against, who is it now? This Wayne State this coming weekend, who is a pretty formidable opponent. But yeah, I mean, the Winona game came down to special teams. That's as much as I took away from this game. Offense played pretty well. Defense, again, played pretty well. Just unfortunate blunders in the special teams department are going to cost you in a close game.
Right. And, we've talked about this all season long, but Bemidji State has played, go through the schedule. I mean, they had a 1-score loss. I mean, last week they, against Minot State, they won by multiple scores, but then Northern was a 1-score game. Go back to Sioux Falls, a 1-score game, a 1-score game against Michigan Tech, 1-score game against Minnesota State. And then your win. So you have some blowout wins against bad teams.
5 1-score games out of 8 games played so far this year.
Right. And I don't
2 and 3 in those games.
Look, Bolte said it before, right? When we had Alex Favor, the Bemidji Pioneer, on the podcast, and he said, they've played on kind of razor's edge sometimes. And like with the Vikings, I know Kevin O'Connell started out like 8-0 in 1-score games. And then all of a sudden he's been 500 in 1-score games, because that's really what everybody is in 1-score games, regardless of anything. Typically those are just coin flip games, and turns out they've been coin flips this year on whether Bemidji State has won. When you look at Mankato, when you look at Sioux Falls, one where they ended up coming out on the winning side of things. They're coin flips, and sometimes it goes up heads and sometimes it goes up tails. So it's tough, because they put themselves in a position to where some of that special team stuff matters. They'll say every part of the game can be improved here and there, but you're right. Special teams is really what just was tough for them, and the block kick, the punts not being on point. And it's tough because when people say all 3 phases of the game, they mean all 3 phases of the game have to be on point to be a consistently good football team. And that's just a week where they didn't have their best game, and it cost them. And now they're going to have to figure out how to beat a really good opponent. The good news is, like you mentioned, Ian, 2 of their last 3 games are home. But now that loss to Winona State, both Winona State and Bemidji State are 4-3 in the conference. Winona State now is the tiebreaker. Ian, let's go around the NSIC. And if you can, maybe we'll do a standings check.
Yeah, I just had one quick, about the season as a whole, is just like the first 2 losses. It comes down to one play at the end of the game, where if it goes differently, Minnesota State misses that field goal, you're, what are we, 5-3? So we're 6-2. And if we convert a 2-point conversion against Northern, we're 7-1. And, Winona State, it's a little bit more cut and dry just because of the game was already kind of decided by the end because of the special teams, unfortunately. And, the offense just wasn't able to climb back into it once Winona kind of got the lead. They didn't let go. But yeah, it's a frustrating season to say the least, but the team has been competitive in all of these games at the very least. So I don't expect that to change over the course of the next couple of weeks. But yeah, looking forward to this weekend's game against Wayne State. But Yeah, let's travel around the NSIC really quick because it was a crazy week again in the NSIC. Sioux Falls with the upset in Wayne over Wayne State, 23-13, which again, if you're looking at it and you get up that win against Winona State, you're like, all right, this Wayne State team is very beatable. We're at home, we can do this. And now you're like, they're beatable, but so are we maybe. But Northern State travels to St. Paul, taking down Concordia St. Paul 35-34. Minnesota Duluth at home, 35-21 victor over Minot State. MSU Moorhead, 38-6 win over Southwest Minnesota State. Unfortunately, Winona was able to hold on and win 31-28 over Bemidji State. And Augustana taking it to Minnesota State 34-16. So Augustana now, I believe, if we tab over to the standings, sits alone at the top of the conference at 6-1. Sioux Falls at 6-2. Sioux Falls, a little bit better. They have really had a bounce back year this year after going 3-8 last season.
Right.
But those are the top two teams right now. Then you got a cluster of 5-win teams, Minnesota State and Wayne State, followed by actually Northern State, CJ, 5-4 on the season and 5-3 in the conference. So they've really turned it around.
They've really turned it around. Yeah, that Bemidji State win must have been enough to kind of lift them because they've been playing really good ball as of late, and Coach Heinen's offense have gotten some things going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Friend of the podcast, by the way, Northern State offensive coordinator, Jordan.
Bemidji State now in a 3-way tie with the teams below them, Moorhead and Winona State at 4-3. Then you got Minnesota Duluth at 3-4 with Minot State at 3-5, Concordia St. Paul at 2-5, and UMary and Southwest Minnesota State still winless in the conference at 0-7. So that's kind of a look around the NSIC. And, we got a game against Wayne coming up this weekend that's going to be pretty important if the Beavers want to have any chance in kind of climbing their way back into this hunt for the playoffs.
Think about this, though, Ian. I mean, if Bemidji State gets a win over Wayne State, all of a sudden they're 5-3 in the conference. Wayne goes to 5-3. Bemidji State can slingshot them up. Northern will have the tiebreaker over you. Minnesota State will have the tiebreaker over you either way. But I mean, what do we think that, where's a realistic place for them to finish? Can they finish top 5 in this conference? I mean, they're sitting right now at 6. Is it, can they finish top 3? I mean, it's pretty tough with those 6-win teams, especially since Minnesota State likely will get to 6 wins next week and they'll have a game in hand. But I mean, if you're trying to be hopeful, if you're trying to spin the most positive thing you can, I mean, if they win out, there's still a chance, right? Or are we slamming the door on this completely?
Are you talking for just like NSIC championship?
I'm talking for playoffs. Are we ready to slam the door on
playoffs? I'm not going to slam it shut yet because I think that the 3 teams you have coming up, Moorhead, obviously, we thought might be a better win on the resume than it would be if we can pull that off. They've kind of been 500 or so this year.
They're a volatile 500.
Yeah. So, but Wayne State and Augustana would be two very good wins to add to the resume.
An Augustana win would be a great win for this team.
Yeah. So if they can pull off a 3-0, I don't think it's fair to slam the door because you don't know what's going to happen around the conference for the last couple of weeks. Minnesota State, they've got a game against Northern State. They got a game coming up against UMary, and then they close out the season against Duluth in Duluth. So there's a chance they drop 1 or 2 of those games. I mean, Northern's been playing really well. Duluth isn't living up to their hype from the preseason, but they're still a good team. Like this conference, anybody can really beat anybody on any given week. Maybe sans UMary and Southwest, but Augustana plays Sioux Falls 2 weeks from now, and then they play us, so they could drop those 2 games. I think it'd be really tough to climb up and win the conference because Sioux Falls' remaining 2 games are against Augustana and Southwest Minnesota State. So one of those 2 teams has got to win that game, and it would be really tough to win the conference at this point. I don't think
the conference is toast.
Yeah.
I think. I don't think it's just math. It's just a math problem at this point.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they could get into the playoffs, but I think they'd have to play really well and for sure go 3-0 over these last 3 weeks. So yeah, like I said, take it 1 week at a time. If you can get a win, a decent win, maybe a 10-point double-digit win against this Wayne State team, maybe you're looking back on the right track, but we'll see. This is about the time of year that those rankings start coming out. So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for that when that eventually drops. But I'm assuming Bemidji State will not be in at least the preliminary one. They'd have to start doing some convincing here over the last couple of weeks.
They're going to need to probably win. I mean, they're going to need to beat Wayne. They're going to need to beat Augustana, and they're going to need to beat Moorhead thoroughly. And by thoroughly, I mean like by a couple scores. I mean, they're going to need to look convincing. And we know Moorhead can be volatile, but they're going to need to but the committee's not going to care that they're volatile. Like you're going to need to find a way to beat them. Like escaping 19-20 or something like that isn't going to be bad, but it's not necessarily going to be a convincer. Anyway, I mean, we could talk about this over and over again. The moral of the story is they have to win, and they have to win. I mean, they have no margin for error anymore throughout their season. And that's why, earlier when they lost that game to Mankato, and we go, they lost, but it's okay because that was a good team that they played, and they played well, which they did. And I'm not taking anything away from that. But when you lose, it just gives you a margin for error that shrinks. And then when you drop that game to Northern, I mean, no biggie in the grand scheme of things. They're still going to be a good team. But then it shrinks that margin of error to when you play a team like Winona State that beats you. Now you have none. In NFL terms, the Vikings last year started out 0-3. They missed the playoffs by like a game. Well, they wouldn't have started out 0-3. They're in the playoffs. All right. Like the Vikings start out 5-0 this year. And they're very highly likely to make the playoffs because they've given themselves margin for error to drop a game here and there because now they're up 5 games. Like that's just the reality of the situation. And Bemidji State just, unfortunately, I mean, it happens. It's a tough conference. Like it's way hard. Like it's a lot, it's easy for me to say, just go 8-0 over the course of these games. But I mean, that's just kind of where things sit. You're going to drop a game or two over the course of the season. That's going to happen, but you have to pick your moments to where it doesn't sink you like it kind of did there. All right, we could talk about this forever, but let's preview this Wayne State game here. Ian, this is a classic strength versus strength game. When you look at Bemidji State's defense, which in the NSIC has the lowest amount of points allowed, they average 16.1 points a game versus Wayne State, which averages 32.5 points a game and 260 points on the season, making them outside of UMD, the top offense, one of the top offenses in the conference. They're ranked second behind the Bulldogs. The strength versus strength, the team that wants to score a lot of points versus a team that's good at preventing you from doing that. I mean, that's what we're looking at, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a weird thing to look at because the scoring offense, like you said, is better than Bemidji State. But both the rushing and passing offenses currently sit behind the Beavers. Beavers are 4th in the NSIC in rushing offense, and Wayne State sits at 8th. And in passing offense, the Beavers sit in 6th, and Wayne State sits again in 8th. So it does look like, in terms of yards, maybe the Beavers have a little bit of an advantage. And there's many things that could go into that. Maybe Wayne State is very consistent kicking field goals or getting touchdowns when they go on a long drive. And Bemidji might have a few more red zone turnovers this year. So there's plenty of things that could go into that. But I do think this is a very even matchup again. And I think it's something that the Beavers could benefit from being at home at the Chet. We talked about when we talked to Alex Faber, and he was very excited to get to this game because of the fact that this is going to be probably one of the biggest matchups, maybe outside of Augustana in a couple of weeks, that the Beavers get to see at the Chet this season. So hopefully the fans show up and realize kind of the stakes that are on the line for this game. Yeah, it might be over anyways, but it's for sure over if you lose this game. So the fans hopefully will show up and show out. I'm not sure what the forecast looks like for next weekend already in Bemidji, but we don't care if it's a little cold. That's what the fans are used to anyways. They live up there. They know what they're getting into. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting game.
Saturday,
if you look at the
sunny high of 53, so actually pretty good conditions for this time of year.
Yeah, that's not bad. You look at the field goal percentage. Why does this not feel accurate? Maybe they do only kick. I guess it's Division II. They probably don't kick that many field goals, but Wayne State is apparently only 4 for 4 on field goal attempts this year.
Don't have to when you score touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, that seems crazy. Bemidji State, unfortunately, 3 of 6. Have we really only attempted 6 field goals?
Yeah, I
That
mean,
feels
that
really
sounds about
low.
right. That sounds about right for the same reason. We score a lot of touchdowns, but also, Bolte being a
We
more
go for it
aggressive
a lot on fourth down. Yeah.
down. I mean, just
Yeah.
because, and this is nothing against college kickers, like as people, but this is just as a statistic, college kickers are just, especially at the Division II level. I mean, even at the Division I FBS level, it's tough to get a good, consistent kicker to
Or
have
for the New
that.
York Jets, apparently.
uh, you know, our franchises have never been plagued by historic special
No,
teams
no.
woes. No, no, no. Surely it's everybody else.
Yeah.
Kicking's hard. It is hard, and that's why
Yeah.
only like there's 5 people ever who can do it consistently good, and the rest of them all get cut after like 2 years of being on an NFL team. Like that's just a very volatile position because so much has to go right, especially at the Division II level. But yeah. I mean, for this game, for Bemidji State, it's at home, it's at the Chet, which is going to help. I mean, and I talk about defense, but Wayne State's defense, they're ranked third in the NSIC with 17.5 points allowed per game. They're tough. They're a good team. Now, Bemidji State has a top 6 offense in the conference. So to give the Beavers a little bit of credit there, averaging 26.5 points a game. But I mean, this is going to be a tough one. And this is going to be one where, Bemidji State, they're not as built in years past to come back from multi-score games, but like every game, they're going to need to get up early and they're going to need to avoid kind of getting down to where they can't lean on their running game and have to pass the entire game. Now, the McGaff can't do it, but you're taking some of your better playmakers on your offense just out of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. Another interesting thing to watch is going to be third down conversions. The Beavers currently lead the NSIC in third down conversions offensively. They have a percentage of 47% conversion rate, but Wayne State's defense leads the NSIC at 29.8% conversion
And a
rate.
lot of
So it'll be
and a lot of that's like that, the high level thing of everybody says, well, third down, but what is it? Is it 3rd and 11? Because teams like Wayne
yeah, it
State puts
doesn't.
teams in 3rd and 11. Well, no,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying is like when you look at the next level of that, Bemidji State gets themselves in a lot of favorable third down situations. Rarely is it 3rd and 13 and they got to convert. It's usually 3rd and 4. And the opposite for Wayne State, where their defense has teams behind the sticks to where it's just very low percentage that you can convert 7 yards consistently on a third down. So that'll be the battle. So third down is the battle, but also like the precursor to that is going to be Bemidji State's offense is going to have to be efficient on first and second down.
Absolutely. That's a huge key. Get yourself in favorable positions, especially against a defense this good. Like you said, top 3 in the NSIC in scoring defense. Trips to the red zone, too, going to be especially important when you're looking at, red zone defense. Wayne State actually does have a middle of the pack red zone defense, but Bemidji State's is a little bit lower. And then red zone offense, Bemidji State is 4th, and Wayne State is down all the way. Oh, no, in 7th. Okay, I missed him when I was scrolling down there. So, yeah, again, a lot of these statistical categories scream these are 2 evenly matched teams. And, you look at the standings, and Wayne State 5-2, Bemidji State 4-3. They're only a game apart. So, that does kind of tell you that these teams
finishes
are
like 17-13, right?
Oh, yeah. There's a very high chance this is a pretty low-scoring game. And, of course, every time we say that, there's going to be, 28 points total in the first quarter. So that's just how it works. But I would probably predict a bit of a low-scoring game. I think the Beavers are going to be a little upset with how they played last week in all facets of the game, just not enough to get it done, unfortunately, against Winona State. So I do think they're going to pull off a 20-17 victory here. I think a missed extra point on 3 touchdowns, and they're going to hold Winona State to a crucial field goal in late in the first half.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Wayne State, upon last check, receiving votes. I believe maybe they're in like the bottom of the rankings, but this is going to be a good game. This is an important game, biggest game of the season. And it's going to be like that from everywhere on out. So let's go Beavs. Go Beavs. All right. Let's talk now about another team that didn't do very well, Ian, and that was women's soccer. 2 draws at a goal apiece. I mean, it's not bad. Like they didn't lose, but they certainly didn't pick up points. And once you get late in the year and everybody's jockeying for position, that's going to be important. So what are your takeaways from the weekend, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, in a vacuum, you look at these games and it's like, okay, we played a good Wayne State team, who is currently sitting in, well, just below Bemidji State. I think they're in ninth right now. If I had to do the quick math, yeah, ninth place. So we went on the road and we played Wayne State and we took a point from them. That's pretty good in a vacuum. And you say the same thing against Augustana, who's currently sitting in, um,
Augustana is third.
third in the
Yeah.
conference. So these are pretty decent teams that Bemidji State's taking points off of. Uh, but you look at the last 4 games that the Beavers have played, and they've taken 3 games out of, or 3 points out of a possible 12. And now you're starting to say, okay, it's not quite so good anymore. Especially when you consider that you've got games against Minnesota State and Concordia St. Paul this weekend coming up. That's 2 of the top 4 teams in the conference. And yeah, you're at home, but now, you've put yourself behind the 8 ball against these teams that are a little bit below you and around you in the standings. So, you don't really have that much wiggle room against a team in Minnesota State who hasn't lost in conference play yet this season. If you don't pick up 3-4 points this weekend, you're going to be looking at a very similar situation to last year, where you're going into that final game of the season and you're a little bit nervous about where you're going to be. I mean, right now, the Beavers do not have home field in the first round. They can certainly take it from Concordia St. Paul when they play them this weekend. If they beat them, they would leapfrog them, assuming, the game against Minnesota State does come first on Friday. So you'd have to see how that goes. And then you'd have to look at where the standings kind of line up against Concordia. But hypothetically, if they take 3 or 4 points from this weekend, I would probably be okay with it. I don't want to see 2 points. Obviously, yeah, taking a point off Minnesota State would be good because they're probably a little bit better than you. But you really need to get 3 points against Concordia St. Paul if you want to have any chance of taking home field in the first round of the playoffs. And unfortunately, unless you are able to get 6 points somehow, you're probably looking at somewhere around maybe the 3 or the 4 or the 5 seed, depending on how his weekend goes. There's only 3 games left. Your last one is against Duluth, who does have only 9 points on the season, but you just never know, man. It's on the road in Duluth, and those last games of the season can be pretty tricky. So this is going to be a big weekend to try to pick up some points. They are currently sitting, let me see how many points they are above. Yeah, so they're sixth right now.
They have 21 points.
So they have a 5-point cushion over Wayne State. And I can go look quickly at who Wayne State would play this weekend to see like maybe how they're going to fare over the course of the weekend. So if Wayne State doesn't really live up to expectations this weekend, they're really the only team. Winona is 9 points behind you, so they would have to take all 9 points from their last 3 games, and you would have to drop all 9 points. So Wayne State's really the only threat behind you. So making the tournament isn't quite in question unless take 0 points from this week.
Unless the bottom falls out from everything, in which case, they got bigger problems.
Yeah, that would be, a sign of bigger problems, like you said. But looks like Wayne State on the schedule this weekend has UMary and Minot State. So those are 2 teams that are up towards the top echelon of the conference. Minot and UMary both in a playoff spot right now. So if the Beavers are able to pick up points this weekend, you actually would want to become a Wayne State fan because that would help you improve your seeding in this conference. But you got to just see how it goes. Take care of the team that's in front of you, and that starts with Minnesota State on Friday at 5 p.m. So, yeah, disappointing to jump out to leads in both of these games and then let it slip. They were able to steal a point away from UMary in the second half, and unfortunately, they just couldn't quite hold on for long enough against either of these teams on the road this weekend. And 3 points from your last 4 games. You've now put yourself in a little bit of a precarious position where 2 weeks ago we were talking about how if this team could go on a little run here against this, I don't want to say mediocre, but middle of the pack kind of teams like Minot State, Wayne State, Augustana is now up in third. But if you could have taken 9 points or 8 points from these games instead of the 3 that you did, this is a whole different conversation we're having. And unfortunately, you're looking down from the bottom half right now. You got to find a way to climb your way back up.
Right, exactly. And remember, we talk about points and we talk about things coming back to haunt you. I mean, tying with you, Mary, doesn't sound so bad, but now you're tied with them in the standings, and being able to pull out a win over them would have been nice because then you would have been able to be over top. And so
I want to
some of
see
the
if I can figure out who still has to take games off because, of course, now we have 15 teams in the conference. So there's going to be 3 teams that have bye weeks over these last 3 weekends. And looks like one of them will be St. Cloud State. Unfortunately, we're 4 points behind St. Cloud State. So we would still need them to drop points elsewhere in order to leapfrog them. And as I look kind of down the standings
Augustana,
here,
maybe.
No, I think Augustana, because Augustana 7-2-2, and St. Cloud is 7-1-4. So those,
Sure.
So I'm looking for teams right now that have played 12 conference games, and it looks like we're looking at maybe Minnesota Duluth, if I'm doing my math right there. And then, yeah, it looks like maybe just a couple teams down at the bottom, towards the bottom of the conference right now is what we're looking at. So we'll see. There's going to be it's all hands on deck here to get any points that you can before the end of the season. And both games are at home this weekend, so that does play into the Beavers' hands. Hopefully they can get 3 or 4 points from this weekend and kind of just douse the fire, stay in a good position to hopefully try to beat Duluth on that last Thursday of the season and jump into a top 4 spot.
All right, let's jump around to a couple other sports, Ian, as we got a lot to talk about with hockey, so I want to make sure we give them the time, but we just kind of need to bounce around and see where we're at with the other sports across Bemidji State here. I mean, when you take a look at volleyball with their weekend, they did, by the way, if we're looking for some positivity, hey, they got not just 1, but 2 wins in conference since we last spoke on Friday and Saturday, getting 4-set victories over Minot State and UMary, both on the road. They have a match against Crookston on Wednesday at the time of recording this podcast, and then they have matches Friday and Saturday, and then all of a sudden their regular season also winds down. But if we're looking at a little positivity, Ian, at least volleyball has gotten a couple wins on the board in NSIC play.
Yeah, good to go on the road and get a sweep this weekend over Minot and UMary. Well, a weekend sweep, not a sweep of a 3-0, but you know what I mean? That's a good weekend. And I honestly, I knew they beat Minot and I couldn't remember, honestly. I saw it was tied 1-1 after 2 against Mary. And I don't think I ever went back and double checked how that game ended. So yeah, volleyball team, kind of the lone bright spot. There was other bright spots, not losing is good for soccer, but we would have loved some wins. Hockey, as we'll talk about, had a bright spot, but they also had a really, really
we'll get to hockey.
So yeah, volleyball, very good results. I think this is their first 2 wins on the season in conference, correct? So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, so good for them. Moving over to hockey, not very good for the BSU women's hockey team. They had to face Wisconsin, top team in the land, and they played like a top team in the land, and they took care of the Beavers over the weekend. Bemidji State lost for Thursday night 4-0 and lost Friday night 6-0. That's going to happen. You play a buzzsaw. Congratulations. You get another buzzsaw. At least this time you don't have to go to Madison. So you save yourself the stench of having to go to Wisconsin. So at least you have that over you. You get to play the Gophers in your rink, and that's going to be Friday and Saturday. Saturday's game, by the way, will be televised on Fox 9 Plus. Puck drop of 2:02 Saturday afternoon. Pretty much with them, they're keeping on. It's tough to get any kind of gauge on their performance when they play a tough team like that. So we'll kind of save that discussion for another week. Let's talk men's hockey, because this is really, what do we say, Ian? What do we say last time we recorded? We said, hey, they should do very well this series. But remember, going to Ferris is a house of horrors for this team.
It really is, man.
And they played what's got to be the worst game that they've played. I mean, for sure this season, but got to be the worst game they've played since when?
I would say worst period they've played. Honestly, when you go back and kind of look at the game, and you separate it period by period, the first period wasn't terrible. Of course, the shorthanded goal in the first period was really bad. And it was, again, it was a microcosm of, okay, the first couple weekends we played pretty sloppy. You know, we made some bad turnovers. We allowed goals at the very butt end of periods. And it was just like, okay, but maybe these are just really talented teams that play in the NCHC. But it seemed to kind of be maybe just a precursor of what we can expect. And I don't know if it's just like we're still kind of getting the blue line pairings figured out. And, you know, it's not quite been as good of a passing unit as I've thought from a team that returned so many forwards from last season. They've kind of got a lot of cohesion coming back, at least in the forward room. So the turnovers have been a real problem. And of course, that's the case on the shorthanded goal in the first period. But you did answer courtesy of Yuri Väisänen, who, by the way, won CCHA Forward of the Week. So congrats to Yuri. He played really well with 3 goals. Spoiler alert. But yeah, man, that second period, they imploded. That was ugly stuff. They can't pass. They give up a goal 16 seconds after they had already given up a goal, you know, to start the period off. And it's like, oh my God. And yeah, the third period looked better, but I wonder how much of that was just Ferris State being up 3 goals and, you know, letting
They're
the
just
Beavers
playing a little more keep away. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you made it 4-2, Yuri Väisänen 5 minutes into the period, and you're thinking, okay, could we do this? Because we kind of made a miraculous comeback last year in the series in Lake State, which happened around this time in the season. It was, I think, our second conference weekend of the season.
Well, didn't they come back against Ferris in that first weekend of the CCHA playoffs? Or am I thinking?
They did, yeah. So like Ferris, Tom just really has an issue with Bob Daniels, I think, because 3 games last year really kind of came down to it. The Beavers had to steal a win in overtime in the last season, or in the last meeting of the regular season. Then they had to steal another win after stealing, you know, getting the game to overtime miraculously. They were able to win in overtime against Ferris in the game 1 of the Mason Cup quarterfinals. Yeah, so it's just Ferris just has this team's number over the last number of seasons, all the way back to that COVID season where I think the one win Ferris had on the year was against a Bemidji State team who ended up going to the national tournament and winning a game. So it's like, whatever, man. Bob Daniels just has Tom figured out. So it was ugly. That was a really, really ugly period. It made me really, really nervous. But they did good, and they answered.
How much of that too, by the way? Sorry, I know you're going to talk about the game that's much better, but how much of that too is coming off of the fact that they didn't have any games last week? I mean, like, is that rust? Is that like, or is it just?
That's made it a little more concerning. Is that like, how are you not prepared for this team? You know, you're coming off a bye week. They're coming off of an 8-0 loss, by the way, in which they allowed 6 power play goals, and your power play went 1 for 7. Like the power play, let's touch on that. I mean, it's been a lack of offensive identity all over the board like this season for this team, I think.
And you kind of expect that a little bit with all the new parts and things like that. But I mean,
a little bit.
I know what you're going to get to on the power play. I'm going to say my piece quick. It feels like they don't really have much of a plan. I know like other people have touched on this. Absolutely. It feels like they are like they don't have their identity yet. It's not that they don't know what they're doing, but it feels like they don't.
Oh, they might not know what they're doing. they might not. Dude,
they don't have a power play identity. It's not like, I mean, obviously last year when you had pole camp, it's really easy to just feed it to pole camp, but you don't have that guy this year. Just the shots when you see them on the power play are so lackluster. Like there's no, it's, you know, in basketball, you talk about high percentage shots. It's like you have a 4-on-5 and you're taking you're taking contested middies at the elbow. Like, what do you like? Move the ball around, like get a better look than that. And it feels like they've kind of been settling. All right, I kind of stepped on your toes enough, but I mean, you're going to say all the same things. Go for it.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is just like the power play, especially, it's noticeable because that's when you should have a great game plan offensively. And, you know, that's kind of why I think, we dominated the games against St. Cloud State, but there wasn't enough of an offensive identity yet. So it's like, we're getting chances, but nobody's putting them in the net. I don't think we found that top line yet that we can really say, okay, we need a goal. this line is going to get it for us, or, and historically over the last couple of seasons, especially, Bemidji State has allowed or relied a lot on their blue line to bring them offensive scoring. And I think that's a big thing, like you said, on the power play. Now we don't have Leighton Road. Now we don't have Eric Polkamp for that power play unit where we can just say, all right, funnel them the puck and let them get a shot off, and they'll put it in the net sometimes. And it's not like BSU's power play unit was like lights
It wasn't
out
like
25% last year or something like that.
It was effective enough.
It was better than I think like 14 that they're sitting at right now.
Anytime it feels like they give somebody the puck, they're like, all right, man, try and shoot it. It's always that meme of the guy with like the boy dad sweater. And he's like, me? You want me to shoot the puck? Okay, here you go.
It is bad offensively on the power play, but hey, you know what? Saturday they came out and they
played much better.
They put some ice on the Flames. There's still concern about how this team will look against a Mankato team this weekend. That is a lot better than
They
Ferris
looked really
State.
good this weekend.
They look really good.
They did Pitlick things and
yeah, especially with Rhett Pitlick. I'm concerned that our blue line might not be able to contain this. I mean, I thought Issa Parek came up and played really well. It's surprising what happens when you have a line of a right shot and a left shot defenseman instead of just having all left shot defensemen out there. It's crazy how cohesive they can look together. I think him and Fulmer looked really good. Tony Fulmer scored his first goal with a goalie in the net, and we didn't get to see it because, oh my God, dude, Lucas, if there's one thing that
Lucas of Beaver territory, friend of the podcast.
Yeah. If there's one thing that guy does that gets to me, it's like everything that I'm about to say or tweet or do, like he beats me to it. And he puts it out there about like not even Midco Sports can save you from the demon that is Ferris State broadcasting. And it's like, that's exactly what I was going to say, on this podcast, but I retweeted it from our account because it's so true. And that's what we talked about. Like, yeah, Midco can come in, but it's not Midco that's going out there and like necessarily
producing.
Exactly. It's still Ferris State that's producing it. And I think we missed a goal last season in one of the games against Ferris State. I made a comment in the Discord, by the way, join the Discord. We had some live chats this weekend. We had a panic session on Friday, and we had a celebration on Saturday after a shutout win for Matthias Scholl.
Join us for the roller coaster.
Yeah. And I made a comment that said, man, I'm sure glad that we got to watch last night's game unobstructed. That's fun. So, yeah. Yuri Väisänen added another goal late in the second period. Kirkland Irie got the first one. Issa Parek got his first career point on an assist in that first goal of this week of Saturday night's game for Kirkland Irie. So congrats to him. 2-3, 1-1 in the conference, tied for first place right now. Stop the count. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, the McNaughton Cup is ours again. Yeah.
Right. So we'll see how this weekend goes, man. This team, Minnesota State, ranked 16th in the country. And
well, before we do a deep dive on this team, I mean, you had the opportunity to go on the Mankato version of Beaver banter and
Mavericks, yes.
Yeah, Chat and Mavericks. What'd you learn? What was your intel on your fact-finding mission?
Well, I didn't honestly hear a ton about what they had to say about Mankato. I have been listening to their podcast a little bit. I knew who they were when they DM'd us yesterday, so they wasn't coming completely out of the dark. But I mostly just previewed Bemidji State, and they kind of asked some questions about, you can go listen to it if you want to kind of plug those guys. I'm sure there's not too many people that listen to this podcast that are super eager to go seek out a Mankato podcast. But just as I'm sure there's not a ton of people that listen to them that are like, oh, yeah, Bemidji State had a podcast? I didn't know that. Let me go.
Well, I thought people just came for us. I thought that's what it was.
Yeah. So, I mostly just gave a preview of Bemidji State. They did ask about the foreign players on the roster and if that's something that Bemidji State's always kind of done. And I said, yeah, absolutely. As far as I've known, we've always had people from Scandinavia over there, Sweden, Norway, Finland.
Bemidji State's always had a tougher climb getting those in-state recruits and getting regional recruits. And so they dominated international recruiting, and that's what they've done over the last decade plus.
Yeah, 100%. And so I didn't learn a lot from them. They did say that top line with Pitlick and I honestly can't remember who plays with them. I did watch a little bit of the second game against Omaha. It was a snooze fest as they won 1-0, but they did sweep Omaha. They have split with UND this year, and they did split with Merrimack, which was not ideal for them, but they also took a point in Yost Arena against Michigan. So they won one of those games too. So they've had a much better non-conference than we have so far. So
they feel like a program too that, like, I mean, last year with Hastings leaving and like with that program getting gutted, and like it felt like a gut punch, and they kind of spent last year reeling, and they still finished top 3 in the conference, and they still were knocking on the door of McNaughton Cup. Now Bemidji State put them in their place where they belong, but I mean, it feels like after they got their footing last year that they got Pitt, like, which is huge for them. And now they kind of have it a full year under this coaching staff and under this new program just to get settled back in. And we'll kind of see how strong that infrastructure is in Mankato, because like you talked about, it's not like they're setting the world on fire, but they've gone up against some good teams and they've shown that they can hang with them. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens this weekend for Bemidji State. Because again, the last time these two teams played was Bemidji State winning the McNaughton Cup at the Sanford Center. So I'm sure that's going to stick with both teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I predicted a split when I went on the Chat and Maps pod yesterday.
The safest answer.
Well, yeah. And I think that it's just like, it's Bemidji Mankato. Like, no matter how good Mankato is and how mediocre Bemidji might be, Bemidji always turns up for these games. Like, even, a couple of years ago, Mankato goes to the national championship. I think Bemidji still beat them once that season. So it's like, it's not necessarily always going to be this cut and dry, like, oh, we're going to get swept. And I think being at home will help Bemidji as well, for part of that series. But I think it's possible that either of these teams.
And first home game in almost a month too.
Yeah. Second and third home games of the season. We've only had the one against St. Cloud so far. So that will be interesting to see how many of the people turn out for these lovely games. But yeah, I think, maybe you get one game where Matthias Scholl stands on his head and you win a, 2-1 or 1-0, hockey game, or, and then the next night, maybe your offense finally turns up and you win a 5-4 hockey game. I don't know. You could sweep. It's very much possible, but we'll see. I don't know. I didn't have the guts to predict it, especially going on a Maverick podcast.
You didn't want to go into the Lions Den and start predicting that they're going to sweep. It was going to look like the McNaughton Cup Series clincher last year.
No. Unfortunately, I didn't have the guts to do that.
No, because you didn't want to get invited back on the next week for them to be like, about that, if you're wrong. So you're covering your bases. I get what you're doing.
Yeah, how did that go last week, bud? Kind of covering my bases a little bit there.
You get the Tim Robinson, you sure about that? Just said to you for 40 minutes, and then they asked you to leave.
Yeah. Not a great weekend, by the way, for the CCHA. Outside of Mankato, the best result for the pairwise was a overtime loss by Michigan Tech to Clarkson. So that is not good. I will say, yes, I know it's good for the conference to win games outside the conference. I know that that's a good thing for pairwise. That isn't going to stop me from laughing hysterically when the Tommies get absolutely obliterated by the Gophers. I love to see that.
What are you talking about? They're this rising program. They're this like crown jewel of hockey. I mean, just ask them. I mean, they're God's gift to hockey.
They're clearly one of the best teams in the CCHA.
Yeah,
they're probably going to win it easily.
They're so good they need to leave. Like, they're so good that NCHC is just begging for them to come. Not just that they want the Twin Cities money. It's all just because they think St. Thomas is this bastion of hockey excellence. And, they got stomped. Oh, yeah. All right, good. Yep. Good.
Love to see it.
Sorry to any St. Thomas
fans.
Sucks
for the CCHA, but
I'm not sorry.
Yeah, it's good to see. I love watching them lose. So
yeah, they went from like lovable, like, oh cool, D3 to D1, like lovable underdogs to, oh yeah, it's that Mr. Krabs meme where he's like, wait a minute, we don't like St. Thomas. Like, everybody quickly snap back to, oh yeah, that's right,
dude. We need to get them a waiver so that they can get in the NCAA tournament. Like, this is totally not fair. It's like, brother, they're not going to make the NCAA tournament with or without a waiver. I promise you. That might be too far. I mean, maybe next year they come out and they're finally putting it together. I do think that eventually they will be on that level of maybe not Minnesota, But
They
they'll
got
be
to
up
get that
there.
new barn up.
Well, exactly. Especially when they get that thing up and running, they'll be up there with like the St. Cloud States. And I was about to say Duluth, as if Duluth was like below Minnesota, but like Duluth's
I mean,
won
in the
3
last
national
10 years, I mean,
championships in
Duluth
the last
has
10 years, whatever. So they've technically been the best team in the state. So yeah, they'll be up there with like St. Cloud State, I'm sure, in not too long. So not that St. Cloud State is any good at anything, but you know.
Not that you got to hand it to them. Their football team hasn't lost a game in like 7 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you see that shot, by the way? Well, not even a shot. It was just like a statistic that like the college football, like r/college football Twitter
Oh.
page put out about like the most interceptions in a game. Oh, it was actually Bemidji State playing St. Cloud State. And I quoted it with the
50
fuck
cent.
you say fuck me for? Like, what did I do? Like, you know what I mean?
What? It's funnier when they had that 50 cent gif without any audio, and it's just, or like without any caption, and it's just him going.
I think that's
like
the one that I posted on it. I tried to get the one without the
It's
caption.
like kind of half sped up. Like it's not fast, but it's not normal speed. Anyway, it's no, you responded to that perfectly. It's like, what did I do? I'm catching strays over here, Bemidji State football. It's like if all of a sudden somebody brings up that baseball game from like what's now getting close to be like 10 years ago, but that one where it was like 40 runs combined or 60 runs, or I don't know. It was too much for a game. But yeah, I mean, I think split this weekend. I'm going to go safe with you. I mean, these two teams just always play competitive against each other. Bemidji State getting a sweep in the last series of the season last year was kind of a little just case of where teams were at that point in the year. But this one's going to be competitive. This one's going to be fun. If you're thinking about going to the game at all, go to the game because Mankato is going to travel and we got to make sure that we got people who are going to be there, because the last thing we need, like for football, is that darn train horn just blasting. I don't need any of that.
Yeah, I'm very grateful that we won't have to listen to any Olays this weekend. So that would be that's probably the number one like thing that's kept me out of games in Mankato, because I don't live ultimately that far from Mankato.
It's
so
not close, but it's a justifiable drive.
It's like 2 hours, I think, maybe a little bit, like hour and a half.
For me, it's like 4 hours. It's like a jaunt.
But hearing that damn Olay might just be enough to keep me out of that building. You know what I mean? So
I've driven past it a couple times. I've had to cover some state softball tournaments, and they're always in Mankato. And yeah, every time I'm like, it's always like May, so it's just empty, but it still makes me shudder. I mean, all right, let's wrap things up here quickly. What does Bemidji State have to do to get a win? What's the key to victory here? Is it going to be just a power play? Is it going to be
protect the puck? I think just none of these silly turnovers. We've won. I mean, Lucas put up the stats in the Discord not that long ago. I think we won the expected goals on Friday. Of course, that's totally irrelevant as long as you don't win the real goals. But you know, it's like
they're doing the right things.
We're doing the right things. We just got to stop turning the puck over in these horrible positions in the neutral zone and in our own defensive zone. And you know, I've seen too many pucks hop over sticks, you know, that could be kept in the zone offensively and establish some. It's got to be a little bit cleaner, especially against maybe the best team you're going to play so far this season. I don't know. St. Cloud State was ranked a little bit higher, but I don't think that I necessarily agree that St. Cloud State is too much of a better team than Mankato, at least so far from what I've seen.
Right. All right. That's going to do it for us. This is the Beaver Banter Podcast. Ian, anything, you already got your Chargers plug in. You got that like out of the way early. Any other things that we got to talk about? We've plugged the Discord.
Justin Herbert's incredible, dude. I'm so spoiled watching him. I got to give him a shout out. Shout out Justin Herbert.
Ian, weren't you giving Vikings fans tough times for complaining about the Saints? What was that Saints defensive lineman doing to Justin Herbert? Was he trying to do something a little extracurricular?
Dude, the fan base for the Chargers did a 180 on Bradley Bozeman so quick. They're like, well, yeah, the reason Herbert was probably had a guy around his ankle is because Bozeman didn't block him. But we like Bozeman now because he completely flattened that dude when he was on Herbert's ankle. Yeah, I mean, that is
Classic
on
Saints
par for the
football.
course for the Saints, so it was a second half touchdown, multiple. The Chargers have only had one this season. So we'll see. It is a win against the Saints, and that's only good for so much, but you got to beat them. If you lose, it's even worse. Win the games that are in front of you, I guess.
It's a win-win for Ian. Coach Harbaugh gets a coach for the Chargers, and also Michigan without there may be a reason why Harbaugh decided to go to the NFL, because that Michigan team, woof, man. They're bad. Yeah. They're I shouldn't say bad. They are just not good.
They're mediocre. I mean, for a team coming off a national championship, you expect more than that.
Right.
I mean, yeah, they lost their head coach and their strength and conditioning coach and their defensive coordinator all to the Chargers, but
their quarterback went to the NFL, and like 10 of their starters went to the
Jesse
NFL.
Minter.
Yeah.
I mean, no, Jesse Minter's a terrible defensive coordinator. You don't want to hire him. He would be a terrible head coach.
Now Michigan football is just stuck with Wink Martindale in the year of our Lord 2024.
I've had the Giants Steelers game on, by the way. We're recording this on Monday night. It's 9-9 with 6 total field goals in this game so far.
God, why does ESPN keep giving them these games, man?
I was like,
why do the...
Oh, man. There's football on tonight, CJ. I don't want to record it. And then I'm like, wait, no, it's Giants Steelers. We're good to go, dude.
Do you want the Danger Witch?
Do you want the Danger Witch? What an awkward commercial.
God, Russell Wilson, man. The funny thing, and we'll end the podcast on this because now we're off the rails.
We're ready.
But if you're still with us, here's the one thing I want to stake my claim to. I claimed for years, basically since he came to the NFL, that Russell Wilson was a ingenuous phony. And he may not be a phony, but he may just be like a tryhard. And either way, it's like everyone's like, oh, look at him. He's a hard worker and he's a this. I'm like, that guy's annoying. Like, he's annoying. Like, he's constantly tryharding or constantly just bringing up his achievements, like how successful he is and how this and that. And he wants you to know it. It's not just that it comes up. He wants you to know that, like, he's got a beautiful wife and beautiful kids, and a rich house and a Super Bowl trophy and all this. And anyway, glad to know that Russell Wilson is kind of getting clowned for that. And also, by the way, as a Vikings fan and a certified card-carrying member of the Aaron Rodgers hater club, for years, like the last 15 years, I've said Aaron Rodgers is like a self-entitled tool bag, and nobody cared because he was on The Office and he was doing State Farm commercials and he was doing all this other stuff. And it was only like a few years ago and people were like, wait a minute, Aaron Rodgers is kind of self-absorbed and annoying. And I, as a Vikings fan, was saying that for 15 years. And yeah, there's some bias in there, but I want to admit that I was right at the end. So you know what? I'll take my wins when I can get them, Ian. I'll take them.
Yeah. No, I can't be happier. I will never. I want the Jets to lose every single game for the rest of the season after Aaron Rodgers underthrows Mike Williams by like 5 yards and then has the gall to blame him after the game for running the wrong route. It's like, buddy, you as a quarterback have to take responsibility for it. Like, dude, I'm not even going to get into it.
Believe it or not, Aaron Rodgers wants to play a style of football that was 10 years ago, which is a lot of choice routes and a lot of like just a lot of back shoulder fades. And I think the NFL works now.
Like Jordy Nelson away from a Super Bowl. I'm not going to lie. They might need to go get Jordy Nelson.
How about they go get Eddie Lacy? Is he at the China buffet? Like, where is he?
Yeah.
So, all right. This has been the Beaver Banter podcast. We'll catch